All right, everyone. Welcome to the CoachPreneur Project, our coaches meetup for February. And here is our agenda. Our agenda is very simple today. We have someone amazing. We have Victoria Moran with us, and she's going to be talking on longevity, holistic wellness, and compassion. And then we will have open Q&A with Victoria at around 1:40 p.m. for about 10 to 15 minutes. So be sure to jot down your questions, and you're free to type in your questions in the chat box. Debra and I will keep an eye on them. And this project is led by me, Nivi, and Debra Woods. Amazing Debra Woods. We're not going to all of these, these things around us, but quick about the project. It's a passion project to tap into and advocate for the collective coaching power and potential of the Mayo Clinic health and wellness coach diaspora around the world. And we can't and won't do this alone. All we ask is 60 minutes of your time per month, volunteer coach contributions, keep them coming. They've been great. Expert mini master classes, and success and struggle stories, connect, interact, share. So that's all that we're about. And now to welcome and introduce Victoria. Victoria Moran is listed among VegNews magazine's top 10 living vegetarian authors. She was voted Peta's Sexiest Vegan Over 50 in 2016 and featured twice on Oprah. Victoria Moran has written 13 books, including the iconic Main Street Vegan and the international bestseller, Creating a Charmed Life. Plant-based since 1983, Victoria hosts the award-winning Main Street Vegan podcast, is producer of the 2019 documentary, The Prayer for Compassion, which is about spirituality and food choices, and she is director of Main Street Vegan Academy, the exciting in-person certification program training vegan lifestyle coaches and educators in a magical week in New York City. All righty, so that's it. I'm gonna stop sharing, and with that said, Victoria.
Thank you, Nivi.
Over to you.
What a pleasure to be with you. I'm honored, I'm humbled. I looked into your program and saw what you all have done and continue to do, and hats off to you for having this kind of investment and commitment to really helping people be healthier through things that they can do themselves. So often we hear that health insurance is sickness insurance, and that the real health insurance is what we can do for ourselves. And with the help of people like all of you, that is really the way of health care in the future, as I see it, certainly. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. And I'm really interested to hear what you're interested in and what you want to know about. I love Q&As, so we might make it a little bit longer than we had initially planned on. I don't see any kind of clock, Nivi, any kind of thing that is telling me how long I've talked. There's a clock over there, so I'll just take a look every now and then and make sure that I'm not going over. So I grew up in healthcare, really. My dad was a physician back in Kansas City, and he was an ear, nose, and throat. But as time went on, he got very interested in being a diet doctor. And I think that was kind of easy, maybe, I'm not sure. And at one point, he and my mom had a thing that was called a reducing salon, which was something that you've probably seen on old commercials where ladies would get in and they'd be in these belts and rollers and they would just jiggle themselves. And the idea was if you would jiggle enough and with sufficient intent, then great chunks of yourself would float off into the stratosphere, never to be seen or heard from again. Unfortunately, I was a fat kid. I was bad for business, and the belts and the rollers and the shaking and the jiggling and all the diets didn't work for me. But something that I did learn through all those experiences were that when Benjamin Franklin said there are only two things that can be said to be certain, death and taxes, he left one out because the other one is diets. There's always another one. So I remember when Atkins cycled through the first time and everybody thought it was new, I'm thinking, No, that's not new because my dad brought me that diet back from a medical conference in Las Vegas when I was 15. But then it was called Stillman. And with a little research, I learned that 20 years prior to that, in the 1940s, there had been a similar kind of diet that was protein and fat to put people into a state of ketosis. So these things just cycle around and they come back with different names and different packaging. And I think that what's so important on all of this is we can play with fads and trends and things because it's kind of fun. I think there's a little bit of a teenager in all of us that it's like, oh, wow, celery juice, let me do that, or whatever it happens to be at the moment. But to really have the foundation in true health for the whole person is just such a grace for ourselves and for everybody that we work with. So back to me, I'm this fat kid in Kansas City and swearing that I will never go on another diet when I'm old enough to get to make that choice. But what happened was that coincided with being a teenager. So of course I put myself on more diets and worse diets than I'd gotten from my parents. And that really led me down a very sad path to becoming a compulsive overeater or a food addict. I got to the point where I couldn't go on any kind of diet anymore. I didn't have the power of choice when it came to food. Now, one decision I was able to make for myself in my late teens was to become vegetarian, meaning that I didn't eat anybody who had lived. I didn't eat meat, fish, fowl. And a few years in, I did hear about vegans, and I heard this beautiful, ethical understanding of our relationship with all beings and the earth, and why it would really be an uplifting, elevating decision to live without any animal products and focus on the beautiful produce of the plant kingdom, the grains, the beans, fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds. Oh, it sounded so good. But I was a practicing binge eater. So I would try, I'd go a few weeks and I'd be so good and I'd be so vegan and I'd think I was vegan. And then that urge would come, or maybe somebody would say something unkind and I would feel the need to take care of myself with food. And I would be standing late at night in a 7-Eleven. And at first I would try to read the labels and can I binge and keep it vegan? And I'd read the labels on the junk food and there'd always be some whey or some egg albumin until I would just throw up my hands and say, okay, I want Haagen-Dazs and cheese and yogurt and Little Debbie. So I love to binge on dairy foods for whatever reason. That would be an interesting line of study for some researcher to find out why some people who are binge eaters choose certain foods and others choose others. But I was really in a pickle with the food. I didn't think that there would be a way out for me. But what ultimately happened was I went into a 12-step program for overeaters that absolutely saved my life. I'm so grateful to them. And once I'd been far enough through the steps to know that I did a day at a time have the ability to choose what I would eat, I chose vegan and have never looked back. And nowadays, when somebody says, well, I'm a vegan, that doesn't necessarily tell you a lot about whether they're making healthy choices, because nowadays it's so easy to be vegan. And I could go into that 7-Eleven or, Dunkin' Donuts or Burger King and binge all I wanted and stay vegan. It wasn't like that back in 1983 when that happened for me. We were pretty much forced to be what today is called whole foods, plant-based. There were some non-animal junk foods. I mean, there was Coca-Cola, there were potato chips, but it was pretty paltry. So pretty much all the vegans were eating really, really healthfully. And I think that we wanted to very much in those days, because it was very new, it was very odd. People thought it was so extreme. If you told your doctor that you were vegan, he would be alarmed. When nowadays, so much is known about the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet that if you tell your doctor as I once told a cardiologist, and she said, "Oh, I wish I could get all my patients to eat like that." And then she paused for a minute and said, "I wish I could get myself to eat like that." So it's not true across the board, but in many, many circumstances, physicians do know something about this, and they do have an idea that it's good. Back then, the idea was it must be bad, because those were the days of the 4 food groups. If you are young enough that you didn't come through the 4 food groups, that said that we are supposed to eat the meat group, the fruit and vegetable group, the dairy group, the bread and cereal group. In other words, half your food is supposed to come from animals. And so you walk into a health professional's office at that time and say, "Yeah, well, I don't eat half the food you're supposed to eat." Of course, it scared them. But this is a new era. And it's not only not scary, it's actually highly recommended. And I find so often, particularly here in New York City, I think we have a pretty good concentration of plant-based physicians, but I'll run into people who are saying, "Yeah, I'm trying to do that. My doctor says." My doctor says you either eat like Dean Ornish says, or you go on statins. And a lot of people are just a little bit shy about some kind of drug that is till death do us part. So it's wonderful to see that this is growing in the world. So I lost 60 pounds when I stopped binge eating, and I did that as a vegan, and that has stayed off for these 36 years. I also don't have anything wrong with me I'll be 70 next month. And my family was not this lucky. Everybody in my immediate family had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart issues by the time they were my age. And people in my extended family had a lot of obesity and type 2 diabetes. So we don't seem to be a cancer-prone family, but on both sides, lots and lots of cardiovascular and diabetic problems. And it is absolutely this beautiful gift to me that those are not issues in my life today. And I always tell people when I speak, this is not a panacea. I'm telling you that I'm going to be 70 next month. 10 years from now, I'll be telling you I'm going to be 80 next month. And maybe I will be on a medication then. Maybe I will have had some sort of health trial that I don't foresee right now. This is not about immortality, but I do believe that living the way that I live, and I'm going to talk about other aspects of it in addition to food, it really hedges our bets for that decreased morbidity at the end of life and having vitality and really living every day. And the reason that this is so important to me is we all see how people at the end often have just a hard time. Sometimes it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years even of immobility, chronic pain, lots and lots of difficulties. But I feel that being obese and being a yo-yo dieter and a binge eater in my youth, I've already had morbidity. I lost so much of my early life, my childhood, my teens, my 20s, those first 3 years of my 30s, to the disease of food addiction and obesity. And I was pre-diabetic at that time. I had other issues. My knees were actually giving me trouble. And so it's like now I'm at the age where if my knees start giving me trouble, okay, you get a pass. But you know, when your knees are giving you trouble when you're 22, it's a sad thing. So knowing what it's like to live in a compromised situation, I want to extend my period of living uncompromised as long as I can. So my basic philosophy of health is that it's holistic in the best meaning of that term. So I went vegan for ethical reasons. I went vegan because I really didn't want to support animal agriculture. I didn't want to be part of causing the suffering, causing the death of animals. I'd gotten interested in yoga when I was 17, and I learned that there was a real spiritual component of not eating animals. So that was my initial motivation. I didn't know it was going to be so fabulous for my health. In fact, I thought maybe it wouldn't be. I thought that I might gain weight, because of all those carbs. And I just didn't know if I would get enough of stuff. Because certainly at that time, everybody was saying, well, what about calcium? What about iron? Nobody was asking about B12, which is a very legitimate question and something that plant-based people and all people over 50 need to be supplementing now, according to the Academy of Medicine. But I was sure asked about all those other things. And of course, I worried about them, but went forward, and the results have been absolutely stunning. So for me, I don't feel that I can be healthy if what I do to maintain that has a ripple effect of ill health and discomfort and even death for those around me. So when I think about choosing to eat plant-based, one of the first things I learned way back in the 1970s in this classic book, Diet for a Small Planet by Frances Moore Lappé, she really put vegetarian eating on the map at that time, because she figured out that raising animals for food and all of the crops that are raised to feed cattle and chickens and pigs and others, that is very inefficient protein, very inefficient calorie sources, because so much of it has to be fed to the animals. So in theory, at least, that means that world hunger is more of an issue, because in the wealthier countries, we're eating all these animal foods. So when I sit down to a meal, I'm grateful. I know that not everybody has a meal to eat. And I also have a little bit of comfort in knowing that at least what I'm eating is my share. And I'm not eating something that means that that meal is like 6 or 8 or 10 meals, way more than my share. So that's one way that I think that the way that I have found to live, and I feel very grateful to have discovered it, helps me feel healthier in a more holistic way. And then I have mentioned the animals. They're very important to me, because something that I have learned in years of being on this planet and knowing animals. My academic background is in comparative religions, and I've studied the way animals are seen in religious traditions and philosophies around the world. And even though in the outer kind of practice of religions and things like that, we don't hear a lot about animals, but when you really get into those deep mystical teachings at the heart of all of these traditions, there is this incredible mercy, this compassion, this ability to feel with. That's what compassion means, to feel with. If somebody else is suffering, I feel that suffering. And that doesn't matter if we're talking another person, a person who's close to me, a person who's like me, a person who's far away and different from me, or an animal who has a different body from me, but who has desires, wants, needs, fears, preferences, a desire to be happy, very much like mine. I love the concept of animal pleasure. And that's one of the things that makes me happy too. There was a video I saw online the other day where a dog had one of these contraptions that kids use to slide down a hill. It's not a sled, it's like a flat thing. And so it showed the dog running up the hill, putting this sled-like contraption on the snowy hill, sitting on it, going down the hill, putting it in his mouth, coming back up the hill, and going down again into sled, which is just like, are you serious? Yeah. And these kinds of things help me to see that not only dogs and cats and animals that we know well, but pigs who are more intelligent. I apologize to my dog over here for saying this, more intelligent than dogs. They come in at right about the level of a 3-year-old child. They actually can beat chimps at playing video games. That these beings, in my view, deserve my respect and my caring. And so when I leave them off my plate, then that uplifts my health in another holistic way. And of course, now we know about the contribution of animal agriculture to climate change and to other environmental degradation. So they're telling us now we're in the 8th grade extinction, that many, many, many species are going extinct literally by the day. The pollution situation, particularly in areas where they have hog farms and lots of chicken farms, terrible for the people who live there, terrible for their health. If you've seen a film like Cowspiracy, where they visit these areas and the people will talk about the asthma and the other conditions that they just can't get away from because of all the pollution from animal agriculture. To me, as someone who believes that I'm supposed to care about others, this is really important. And we know from the United Nations and from the World Bank that animal agriculture puts more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere than all transportation combined. And that statistic first came out in 2006, and other studies have backed it up and have actually said it's more than they thought back in 2006. But to this day, every time I say it, it just takes me aback when you think about all the cars, planes, trucks, buses, everything out there, that animal agriculture puts more global warming gases into the atmosphere than everything that gets us and our products from place to place. That's pretty stunning. And so I look at someone like Greta Thunberg, and bless her heart, I've never seen anybody as dedicated to anything as this little girl is to saving this planet. And she is, of course, a proud vegan. And so I feel humbled to stand by her and be one of those as well. So for all those reasons, when somebody says to me, yeah, but isn't paleo a great diet? And isn't keto a great diet? And isn't this, and it's like, maybe. I mean, certainly you get rid of a lot of junk food and people do well on them. But for me, because the holistic picture means so much to me, I couldn't possibly be healthy doing something that I didn't feel was rippling out in that lovely ripple effect to really bring everything up. I used to have a teacher back in school when I was studying comparative religions at North Central College in the Chicago area. And he had this phrase that he would use repeatedly. He would talk about the upward progression of the universe. And I feel like I really want to be part of that. And to me, that's what genuine whole health is all about. So I'll share with you a little bit of how I live and eat. And if anything resonates, then that's cool. And maybe you have some things to share with me. I'll bet you have lots to share with me. So basically on the food front, it has changed somewhat over the years. And I think that's a wonderful thing because, if you go on some kind of diet, that's pretty much it. It's like, here you go. Here's the diet. This is what it says. But this whole kind of plant-based way of doing things gives you so much leeway to try different things, do different things, grow, evolve, change over time. So I've been at this for 36 years and I'm not tired of it, even a little bit. And I think that's because the plant kingdom is so vast and I'm still discovering fruits and vegetables that I didn't even know were out there. And that's really exciting, not to mention all the wonderful recipes and new ways of putting them together. So basically, what my life is like food-wise is early in the morning, my husband, who is fabulous, will wake me up with either herbal tea. It's herbal tea on the days when I teach yoga. And on the days when I go to the gym, it's a little bottle of coconut water. And so that gets me started on a hydration plan for the day because I'm not somebody that ever really got in the habit of drinking a lot of water. So one of the cool things about eating plant-based is that as long as I'm eating lots of raw fruits and vegetables, salads, smoothies, fresh fruit, that kind of thing, I'm getting all this wonderful water. So if you've ever been around health nuts, and you probably have, the arguments that people can have about what's the best water is just dazzling. And you'll get people waxing poetic about distilled water or spring water or alkalinized water. But the fact is, the water that's in fresh fruits and vegetables is distilled by the plants. It is also full of organic minerals, because the people that don't like spring water say, oh, those are inorganic minerals, you can't use them, they'll cause arthritis. I don't think it does, but that's what people argue. And then the whole alkalinized thing where you have to buy some machine that costs $2,000 to alkalinize your water. The water in the fresh fruits and vegetables is alkalinized. So there's nothing to argue about. Such a wonderful, wonderful way to hydrate. And then for breakfast, I will sometimes have oatmeal. I think people think, oh, everybody eats plant-based, they eat oatmeal. I actually think oatmeal can be a little bit gruel-like and remind me too much of a Dickens novel. So I usually do something else. One of my favorite breakfasts is the Ayurvedic chocolate shake. And you could actually email me if you want to, and I can send you the recipe. I've adapted it from a book called The Ayurvedic Vegan Kitchen by Talia Lutzker. And Ayurveda, as you know, is a wonderful ancient Indian healing tradition, which still has, I think, a lot to tell us today. And this Ayurvedic chocolate shake is so cool for two reasons. One is it gets all these spices into you. Now, it used to be I had my Christmas spices in the freezer, and they would pretty much stay there from January to late November. And then I'd get them out, when it was time to make pumpkin pie and cranberry sauce and stuff like that. But now, I go through spices like crazy, because I have learned in Dr. Michael Greger's wonderful book, How Not to Die, and other sources about the high antioxidant content of all of these herbs and spices. So the Ayurvedic chocolate shake has cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom, allspice, ginger, fresh and powdered, and it even has a tiny bit of cayenne pepper. So what is cool about that is in the summertime, maybe I'll have a fruit smoothie and lots of blueberries and frozen bananas and that kind of thing. But this shake, even though it's cold temperature-wise, it's got that cayenne pepper and that ginger, and I can go out in the winter and just feel cozy warm after that wonderful breakfast. Another breakfast I like a lot is some unsweetened, low-fat vegan yogurt. I like Kite Hill unsweetened plain yogurt. And I make a parfait with that and blueberries, either thawed wild blueberries, because they are really the antioxidant superstars, or cultivated blueberries, and maybe a little chopped dates, some flax, some chia, some hemp, and then more of those spices. You can at least put some cinnamon and a tiny bit of clove, which is the highest antioxidant spice in common usage. And it's just fun. It's almost like, as a little girl who was always put on diets, the idea of a parfait is a very pretty thing to me. And the fact that I can have one for breakfast anytime I feel like it is pretty darn cool. So lunch, actually, because I do work from home and make my own hours, I follow the Ayurvedic suggestion of having my biggest meal in the middle of the day. Now, the Ayurvedic teaching is that Agni, your digestive fire, is the hottest at high noon. And so I have a big lunch, or I think of it as dinner. Remember in the olden days, people who lived on farms, it would be breakfast, dinner, and supper. And supper was a little meal. It comes from the same root as the word supplement, just to supplement what you had to eat earlier in the day. So oftentimes, always in the summer and often in the winter too, I'll have a giant salad. And it's funny that lots of people find out I'm vegan and they'll say like, oh, I guess you eat a lot of salad. Like they feel sorry for me because they don't know how I do a salad. So I get my salad bowls at a restaurant supply house. So we're talking great whopping bowl. I've got one that is just gargantuan. And that's the one I use if maybe we have another couple over and there are four of us. But if it's even just my husband and me, or even just me, great big restaurant supply house bowl, because you need some tossing room and you really want to eat a lot of greens. Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who did wonderful research showing heart disease reversal after Dr. Ornish did his groundbreaking work, he actually has his patients eat steamed greens with some balsamic vinegar to help with the healing of the endothelium every 2 hours. Well, that's just not my thing. I'm more one that I eat when it's time to eat and I live in between. So when I do eat greens, I eat a lot of greens. So I love arugula because I'm half Italian. So all the foods that end in vowels I really like. And cilantro is amazing. I have read, I don't have this on good authority, that cilantro is helpful in ridding the body of toxic heavy metals. All I know is it's green, it's good for you. And I'll always put in a salad some cooked stuff. So steamed broccoli, and do you know the trick about broccoli? You serve it with a little mustard powder or a little prepared mustard, and that makes those wonderful phytochemicals that are only available in the cruciferous vegetables more bioavailable. Or I'll put in steamed sweet potatoes, even steamed white potatoes. The half of me that isn't Italian is Irish, so I honor that. And dressing, people say, well, you know, if you don't really use oil very much, then what are you going to do for salad dressing? Well, you can make wonderful rich dressings with a cashew base or a tahini base, but I've actually learned how to just have a mixture of balsamic vinegar and seasoned rice vinegar. There's something about seasoned rice vinegar that's almost a little bit oily. And my trick is, if I put some raisins in the salad for some reason, then I don't miss not having a creamy kind of dressing. I think something goes to the brain. It's either, you know, you got your cream fix or you got your sweet fix. So the nut-based dressings will work and the raisins in the salad will work. So either way, great big salad, and some of those other cooked things on top. I call that oomph factor. And at the end, I'll sometimes have a little date roll or a little square of very dark chocolate, just to be the punctuation at the end of the meal, or even sometimes a tiny little bowl of nuts. You know that phrase, from soup to nuts? I guess that's how people used to eat. I don't know anybody that has nuts for dessert anymore except me. So I do that, and there's something about that little bit more of a concentrated sweet or a concentrated fat, even just in a tiny amount, that is a message to my brain of this is it, you're done. And one of the cool things for me about that is that even though I have not practiced compulsive overeating for 36 years, I am like the guy who hasn't had a drink in 36 years, but knows that if he did, he's going to have a lost weekend. So he will say, I'm Joe, I'm an alcoholic. Well, I'm Victoria, I'm a compulsive overeater. So for a compulsive overeater, the problem isn't starting, the problem is stopping. And so to have that little punctuation, okay, we know when we get our little square of chocolate, when we get our little cup of nuts, not like cup like 8 ounces, but, you know, little nut cup of raw walnuts with their wonderful omega-3 or pistachios or something great and nutty, that's it. I have a friend in Chicago who also is a recovering compulsive overeater, and she's a Protestant lady who visited a Catholic mass, and she tells a story that at the end of the Mass, the priest says, the Mass is ended, go in peace. And for her, that was like, voila, that is my after meals prayer. And she will say, when it's over and done, the meal has ended, I go in peace. So dinner for me, or supper, is pretty light and pretty small, really. I don't feel like eating a lot in the evening, and I also don't like eating close to bedtime. I find that it does disturb my sleep. I can always fall asleep easily, but if I'm too busy digesting food, or I've been drinking tea or something, you know, I'm have to get up in the night. It's harder to get back to sleep than it was when I was 30. So I find it works really well to finish eating no later than 7 o'clock, and that gives me 3 hours to digest, so I can be detoxing and doing all those fabulous things that we do during sleep. So sometimes I'll just have fruit, or fruit with some romaine leaves, or I'll have a little bit of Rip Esselstyn's Engine 2 granola. It's an oil-free, sugar-free, and still amazingly delicious. You know, you start thinking, well, it's gluten-free, and it's this free, and it's that free, and you're thinking, oh, then it must be flavor-free. And sometimes stuff like that is. In that case, it's really pretty good. Or sometimes I'll have soup. Soup and some kind of wonderful bread is really comforting and satisfying to me. So that's what I do at the nighttime. Then the next thing we always talk about after the diet is the exercise. And that does not come naturally to me because I was this chubby child. I was chosen last for all the sports, and I'd really rather that I hadn't been chosen at all because I never got this wonderful relationship with exercise, like, ooh, let's go sweat. I still don't have that. It's like, all right, I'm going to go sweat because I don't want to die soon. But I've figured out some ways to make it a little better. One thing I actually figured out very, very early, and that was that I love yoga. And I think that's because I've always been fascinated by philosophy and by the bigger picture and what does it all mean? And so yoga was the first kind of movement that let me bring my soul along when I went to do this activity. So I have a couple of yoga classes in my building, 2 mornings a week that I teach. And then I take yoga at least once or twice in the week as well. My first yoga teacher is 94 years old, and she's still teaching. So that tells me there is something good about doing yoga. And I do something that I really think is helpful in rejuvenation. I have absolutely no scientific basis for this, but it sure feels right to me. And that is when I'm in a yoga class and somebody else is telling me to relax or to breathe or whatever it is, I envision myself back in Stella's yoga class in London when I went there to study in 1968 when I was 18. And it's very easy to see that room and to feel myself in that 18-year-old body. And I can't swear to this, and there's no data, but I'll just tell you person to person that I feel that when I'm in that state of being that 18-year-old, that my cells and my metabolism process, it is adjusted in a very positive way. So I love yoga. I also love aerial yoga. I gave myself an aerial yoga class for my 65th birthday and realized that it rocks. I mean, there is just something about hanging upside down that just makes the world look right side up. So those I love. And then I also walk on the treadmill, and twice a week I lift the darn weights. You know, it's like some things you just have to do. I've been reading The Alzheimer's Solution by the wonderful doctors Sherzai. And in there, at the end of each chapter, when they talk about the things that we need to do to live better for cognitive health and all-round health, that one of the detriments, one of the enemies to exercise for a lot of people is simply, I just don't like exercise. And when they said that, I'm thinking like, yeah, that's right. But their response to that was, you will dislike Alzheimer's even more. So I am lucky to live in a building that has a nice little gym and get down there every day. And my husband often goes too, which really helps a lot. And then I have gotten into something lately that is really fun. And again, this is completely quirky. It's something called the 5 Tibetan Rites. I don't know if you've heard of it. It has this ridiculous story of how this information came to the planet, and it may well be just made up so that somebody could write a book. But there are 5 very simple exercises that supposedly work on the chakras to help people do better as they go along in life. And the first one is where you hold your arms out and you spin around, not really fast, but you spin around in a clockwise position. And then you get on your back and you do basically leg lifts. There's a little more to it, but basically leg lifts. And then when you're on your knees and you're basically just doing a slight back bend from a kneeling position. And then there's a thing where you make a tabletop, kind of like in triceps push-up position. You go into this tabletop position and hold and tighten everything and let go of that. And then the last one is where you do, if you know yoga, it would be going from upward dog into downward dog. So the recommendation is to start with 3 of those a day and then add on 2 every week until you're at 21. And then you do that for the rest of your life, which is going to be a really long time because you'll probably live to be 111. So whether they're going to make me live to be 111, I don't know, but they intrigue me. And I think that that's really important in customizing how we do our own health and how we help other people be healthier, is to find out, what they're about. There are some people who are more of the kind of accountant MBA sort of mindset, and they would say, those sound stupid to me. Okay, not for them. But I'm the writer and the poet and the religious studies major. I like them. So that's what I do exercise wise. Meditation, I've done transcendental meditation since the early 90s, and I'm a little bit rebellious in that I don't always use the mantra that I paid for. Sometimes when I just feel like I need to convince myself that things are going to be okay, I'll do what I call affirm meditation. And so I'll inhale something like all is and exhale well. All is well. And it's really interesting how the monkey mind will say, no, it isn't. Remember what happened yesterday? And I'll just, all is well. And then it'll be like, don't you ever watch CNN? All is well. And it's just this beautiful way for me to get the benefits of standard meditation, but also this wonderful convincing myself that even though it's easy to go into awfulizing of, oh my God, this could happen, and then that could happen, and then that could happen, come back to all is well. So I absolutely do that once a day. I try to do it twice a day. I usually fail. Sleep, we talked a little bit about. I have to be in bed by 10 o'clock or I just do not function the following day. 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock, wonderful kind of Ayurvedic suggested time for sleep, turning off the electronics half an hour before, and just reading an actual book on paper. I was into the Audible thing for a while where I would listen to the Audible book, and that was nice. It was like having somebody read to me to fall asleep. But then there was that blue light from the phone. So now I'm just kind of back to books on paper, and it works really well. And then, of course, as I told you, I am lucky enough to have my husband bring me a drink in the morning, and that makes getting up at 6 o'clock a lot easier than it used to be before he did that. So I think overall, that's it, along with really being on fire for a cause. And for me, it is this vegan cause. And that doesn't mean that I don't have friends who aren't vegan or anything like that. It's just that I see what it's done for me, and I see the potential that it has to make beautiful, positive changes in the world. So I'm lucky enough that my work and my passion are the same. And if they weren't, I would really have to go out of my way to put some passion into my life, because I think that without that, you're old at 27. So thank you for your indulgence, and I'd be happy to take questions or have a conversation.
Victoria, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are open for questions now, dear coaches. So if you have questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask it, or feel free to write the question in the chat box. And while you're doing that, what I will do is I will just do like a very quick summary, if at all possible, in like under a minute. Victoria, you spoke about vitality, gratitude, eating your share, punctuated eating, affirm meditation, all is well, Tibetan rites, yoga, Ayurvedic cycles, which is called dincharya. It's about how you eat in the day, and all of that. You said a couple of really amazing things that have stuck with me, that will be stuck with me forever. You said, yoga let me bring my soul along to an activity. That is so profound, and that is so powerful. We do have a question. Audrey, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell me a little bit about the class you offer in New York City?
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for asking. It's almost like asking somebody to show pictures of their children or their grandchildren. It's like, oh yeah, I'll talk about my academy. So Main Street Vegan Academy grew out of my book, Main Street Vegan, which was published in 2012. Now, when the publisher heard the name of that book, they didn't like it. They said, we don't like Main Street. You have to change the name. And so, trying to be a team player, I was trying to come up with another name, and nothing sounded really good. I knew it was supposed to be called Main Street Vegan. And so I had a miracle. And I really do believe that this is the time when these ideas are supposed to be getting out into the world. And maybe we get a little bit of help on that. So there was somebody so famous, you could recognize him from the back. And it was Michael Moore, the filmmaker, out on Broadway signing autographs. And he had liked a weight loss book that I had written some years before. I knew that because he wrote about it in Oprah's magazine. So I just gave my card to the woman who was with him and went on walking up Broadway. And about 15 seconds later, I hear, Victoria! And it's Michael Moore saying, we need to talk. We need to talk about food. I'm going to call you. And I thought, of course you are. People with Academy Awards call me so often. It is really getting to be boring, but he did. And in one of these calls, I mentioned that the book I was writing was supposed to be called Main Street Vegan, and the publisher didn't like it. And he said, let me talk to them. So he intervened. I mean, which is still like, what? How did that happen? But he did. He convinced my editor. And when she convinced the higher ups, she called me and she said, okay, you've got it. Main Street Vegan, that's your title. And that just like started an inspiration fount. And it's like, oh my gosh, Main Street Vegan, there needs to be a Main Street Vegan podcast, which now there is. We've been on the air for 8 years. There needs to be a Main Street Vegan production company, which there is. And that's how we brought a prayer for compassion to the world, helped other people do that. And there needs to be Main Street Vegan Academy, training and certifying vegan lifestyle coaches. So that's a long introduction just to let you know that to me, this is just a blessed pursuit. So what Main Street Vegan Academy is a 5.5-day, very intensive, where you come to New York City and you learn every aspect of vegan living from the best and the brightest. So we have a track of vegan principles, which includes health, usually from Dr. Robert Osfeld of the Montefiore Cardiac Wellness Center, Marty Davy, a registered dietitian who comes up from the University of South Carolina, where she's involved in a 5-year study with the NIH. And we have history of the vegetarian movement and fashion and animal rights and animal law with a Columbia University law professor. So the basics of this entire lifestyle from the health point of view and other points of view. Then we have communication principles. So people know all these things, they have to read a lot of books before they come here. And so we're founts of information, but how do we get it out? So we have classes in public speaking, in coaching techniques, working with mixed and transitional families, working with people who deal with weight and emotional eating and food addiction issues. And then we have business principles for those people who really do want to make this a business, either full-time, which only a few people have done, but many part-time. So then we go on field trips because, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of learning. And New York City is Disneyland for vegans. I mean, it is amazing. So we go to a vegan fromagerie that's actually owned by one of our graduates. We go to a wonderful body care shop, a little raw food and detox market run by a fabulous curmudgeonly musician who talks to us. We go to a vegan shoe store, an Indian spice market. So we really hit the high points in New York City. And then the other thing that I'm so proud of with Main Street Vegan Academy is we're there for people afterwards, just like you guys are together in this wonderful group right now. We have a private Facebook group. We have reunions. We have an optional master class every 2 or 3 years. So it's just this wonderful camaraderie, and I'm so proud of some of our graduates. So among them is JL Fields, who's written so many books like Vegan Pressure Cooker. She did the recipes for Jenny Messina RD's Vegan for Her. We have Kat Mendenhall, cowboy boots in Dallas, all eco-friendly, made in America, cruelty-free cowboy boots. Some of our graduates have a little bodega in Philadelphia. There's a woman in Mexico City with a vegan ice cream company. There's somebody in Colombia with a cheese and yogurt company. So we have 470 graduates from 29 countries, and they're all out there doing something great. So if you're interested in learning more, it's mainstreetvegan.net, and just click on Academy. And thanks for asking.
Perfect. So, so guys, do you have more questions for Victoria? Please keep them coming in the chat box. I'm going to say something else. So, Victoria, you also mentioned there's something about hanging upside down that makes the world right side up.
Yeah. Well, inversions are very popular in yoga. Everybody knows about headstands and shoulder stands and the like. I was in a pretty serious car accident in the early 90s, and so I can't do shoulder stands or headstands for that matter, unless I bought some kind of prop and, went to a lot of trouble. So for me, being able to hang upside down from these, they call them silks. They're not really silk. They're like a piece of fabric hanging from the wall, kind of like a swing. And so there are different ways of, wrapping your legs around and getting yourself involved in this fabric so that you can be in position with the world in a way that you usually aren't. And I think just like when we're kids, everybody loves the jungle gym, the monkey bars. We don't get over that. We just think we get over it. And one of the other things I love so much about aerial yoga is that you have to pay attention. And I think one of the things that I never liked about a lot of conventional sorts of, being on the treadmill or, aerobics class or whatever, is there was nowhere for my mind to attach. It's like, yeah, I'm doing this, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do later today. But with aerial yoga, you really do have to be engaged in the moment, every moment, or you could fall on your head. Now, you're probably not going to kill yourself because it's not that high up, but still, nobody wants to fall on their head. So there's this need to pay attention, which is one of the things I love. And then also, there's a certain amount of challenge to it. And I'm not going to be, any kind of expert. My daughter actually is a professional aerialist, and it's so cool to see her flying through the air in earnest. So I'm not going to do that. And yet, to be able to flip over this week when last week I couldn't do that, that's really good psychologically, because there's always something more to learn and accomplish.
Right. Thank you so much, Victoria. I'm going to let Debra Woods, my dear partner in this project, do say a word of thanks and also do the closing and key takeaways from the coaches.
Thank you, Victoria, for taking the time to speak with us today and for providing tremendous replenishment for each of us in a way that we can take with us and share with others. It has been a gift of an hour with you, and we thank you for that. We all, I think, really enjoyed hearing your backstory, and from you as a young girl to the evolution of where you are now. And one of the things I'm curious about, and I don't know if you could take a moment to comment on this, but how did you go from being that young girl to one who speaks so articulately and passionately and so present in your speaking to impact the lives of others in the way that you do? Could you take just a moment to share your thoughts on that?
Well, some people have lots of gifts and talents. I remember interviewing an author named Barbara Scher, who wrote a book called Refuse to Choose, for people who just have so many gifts and talents that they just don't know what to pursue. I never had that problem. I can do words. That is all I can do. But I knew early on that I could write and that I could speak. So I've followed that path with the things that have interested me and that have been important to me. So one of the things I do when I teach the public speaking class at Main Street Vegan Academy is just try to get people excited about the fact that when you speak for a group, either in person or in a situation, like we have here, people want to get something out of it. And even if you're at something like a lunch and learn at a company, or you're speaking at a school, you know, they're not sitting at their desks doing whatever boring thing they were doing before they came to listen to you. You know, if you're speaking at a school, you've got the kids out of class. And so people want you to be good. And every time I speak to a group, it's just like I enter into another almost psychic box. I'm just so energized. And so you know how I did this. I've always done this. I've always, when I was a little kid, it was perform, listen to me perform, you know? And then that kind of morphed into the speaking, which I've done for a really long time. But if anybody wants to do more of that or feel more effective at that, just know, you know, they'll tell you things like, imagine your audience naked. You don't need to imagine your audience naked. Just imagine your audience smiling because they love you. And something that you could ask any professional speaker, anybody who speaks a lot on pretty much any topic, but particularly any topic that really has to do with people's lives, they'll come up to you afterwards and they'll say, the part I really, really got the most out of was that thing you said about relationships. And the speaker is like, the thing I said about relationships, did I say that? No, but somehow you spoke to that person's condition, even though you didn't exactly say what they thought you said. So it's just such a magical thing. And I think to get out and do lectures and things. And I don't know how the Mayo Clinic coaches, get your clients and that, but a lot of the coaches that I know find, of course, that doing speaking gigs really, really helps. And some people like to do it and some people don't. But there is an English futurist who says that the value of content is rapidly being replaced by the value of breathing the same air. And there's something so incredible about just being where somebody is speaking. Even if it's the same talk they've done 110 times, they've never done it quite this way. It's almost like the reason why people will pay so much money to go see a Broadway show or go to a live sporting event. Because if you're actually there and somebody hits it out of the park, you can tell that story for the rest of your life. And if, as a speaker, you just remind yourself that that's the kind of experience you're giving people, it's very special. And I hope you will, if you don't already, grow to love it.
Yeah. Thank you, Victoria. You've given us so much to take with us, and we appreciate it. And we will be thinking about it in the days to come and taking it to others as well and sharing. Well, there's a book called Your Life is Your Message, a beautiful book of meditations. And to me, it's evident that you walk the talk and your life is your message. And today we will take your energy with us and enthusiasm and passion. And before we move to wrap up, I wondered if anybody wanted to share either in the chat box or verbally, just very briefly, any takeaways that you're going to be taking away with you today. Okay. I know there are a lot, and we thank you for all that you've shared with us. And I look forward to looking at your work with Main Street Vegan, and thank you for all that you've shared with us. May we all walk away from this and take what we've learned and used it in the work that we do with others to enhance their lives and to share enthusiasm and excitement for this life and the vision for the possibilities. So thank you, Victoria. And thank you. And thank you everyone for being with us. May you have a wonderful weekend. And we look forward to next month when we will be meeting with another expert on branding and promoting through LinkedIn. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a terrific weekend.